Welcome to Frontline Women, a show dedicated to women on the leading edge of change and culture renewal in America. I'm Dalisia Coppersmith, and I'll be your host and guide as we explore emerging issues and opportunities for women to lead side by side with men every day. So let's get off the sideline and onto the front line right now. Hey, welcome back, and I hope you're having a good week out there. If you are new to my community, there's a few things that I'm going to cover today that are kind of the foundation of some of the things that I help women with. And that is when they need their sanity check after they've been trying to lead for a while and they don't understand the illogical resistance that they're getting. Well, if you have been in my community or if you've read my book, you'll probably have these emblazoned into your mind, these concepts. But I would ask you to stay tuned anyway, because I bet somebody else needs to hear this from you. I don't know if you've taken the message forward to the extent that maybe you could. So I would love for you to listen to this episode, if you're already familiar with these concepts, as a way for you to get the wording right, to get the examples fresh in your mind, your own examples of when you've experienced these things, and to coach other women in your organization. So how do you know if you are free to lead? That's what we covered in the last episode. I gave you a few things to look at. Well, this episode is all about why we resist women who lead. And it isn't just men who resist women. I think you know that. Women are oftentimes tougher on other women than men are. And we need to get to the bottom of this as quickly as we can in our leadership careers, because if we don't, we cause ourselves a lot of pain and suffering. We can stay awake at night wondering, what's really going on, why we're sort of getting gaslit in some ways, or why we are being labeled in some ways. So let's talk about this. When a woman steps up to lead, is she perceived the same way? Are the expectations the same? And is she supported in the same way as when a man steps up to lead? That's a question for you to consider. My answer is usually not. There are some organizations that are very progressive, and they're wonderful as far as the way that women are treated, seen, supported, and that's great if you're in one of those organizations. My guess is you still run into illogical resistance at times from all genders. So even if the organization's pretty good about it and you have the support you need, there are probably some relationships that you have right now that bother you, that you know you're getting resistance that you, first of all, you don't deserve. You may be getting labeled in ways that you don't deserve. And those are the things that we take home at night with us. Those are the things that when you're out walking your dog with your spouse or your partner, that you end up talking about these kinds of dynamics at work. So I had to get to the bottom of this. Why is it that when a woman steps up to lead, and especially if she is a strong woman, an assertive woman who is very direct and not afraid to self-advocate, why do we get so much resistance when men are celebrated for the same traits? Okay, so here's what I discovered. Looking at family systems theory, there are a couple of things that point directly at this illogical resistance that women get. And the first one is what I call maternal triangulation. And that is where, just like dinner table dynamics, the male figure or figures in the organization, that's who everybody, really looks at as the leader. And for a woman, sometimes she can be seen as a nag, as somebody who's like the enforcer of standards, but you try to get out of her grasp, if you will, just like teenagers do. And look at family dinner table dynamics that are in movies and TV and all of those things. It may not have been this way in your household when you were growing up. In fact, it wasn't this way in my household because I didn't have a maternal figure in the household during my early years. But TV, movies, books, they inform us, right? They inform us of what the interactions are between male and female leaders and who's really in charge. Right? So this affects us as we go into the workplace. So looking around the dinner table, sometimes you'll have a situation where a dad is kind of joking around with the kids about the mom enforcing standards like put your napkin on your lap or use your fork, whatever it is. Have you done your homework? And if the mom is the enforcer, if she is the default enforcer in that way, she can be seen as a nitpicking, as a nag as time goes on. And by the time the kids are teenagers, they really want to push away from her, even if they love her, even if they love her. Dad and the kids kind of joke around about her, and she's the butt of a lot of jokes. So does this happen to dad sometimes? Sure it does, of course. But it doesn't really have the same impact on how the kids view him as a leader in the family, right? Most often, even if we joke around about dad, we still respect him as a leader in the family. With mom, we try to escape her demands. We might roll our eyes when she calls us on something. So just imagine that. We all take that into the workplace with us as adults. So this maternal triangulation where a male figure, a male leadership figure, in this case a dad, and the kids sort of join forces, against the mom. And it's done in a joking way. It's not meant to be harmful to her at all. It's really just a social coping mechanism. But it does affect us because it imprints a mental model that women in leadership are to be resisted. So I don't know if this is resonating for you. I hope that it is, because I see it over and over and over. The example that I used in a previous episode about an executive who was trying to speak up, eventually she had to raise her voice and get a little bit forceful to be heard. Well, on the break, people were making jokes, about what's wrong with her, must be that time of the month, those kind of things. To escape accountability, for their own actions, they had to poke at her about being like a mom. I see this over and over. And I don't know if you've seen it, or maybe you've seen it, but you didn't recognize it as this. You didn't know it was this closely tied to cultural family dynamics, but it can be. So, maternal triangulation, what do we do about that? Well, I recommend that women get out of the maternal role as quickly as they possibly can. And that would be a much longer episode. Actually, that's probably a leadership program we need to go into about this. But if you feel like you're being seen as a maternal figure, like people are just resisting you because they want an answer from a male figure, or they want to escape your demands, they don't want to be held accountable by a woman specifically, then you've got to get out of that maternal role. So whatever that looks like for you, just consider, am I being seen by others as this nagging maternal figure? And if so, how can I recast myself in this narrative as something else? All right, that's the first dynamic I want to talk about. The second is paternal approval seeking. Very closely tied to this, but this is where it pretty frequently happens with women, but it also happens with men, that they are vying for the approval of a male leadership figure. Okay, so you may have peers or even direct reports that go around your back, and they are seeking the favor of or the approval of a male leader. So paternal approval seeking, it is rampant in organizations right now. Just think about the last election in the U.S. and the difference between how some people talked about the male candidate versus the female candidate, and the terms that were used, family terms that were used. I mean, it's that embedded in our culture to see the male leadership figures as the dad in the family and female leadership figures as the mom who is to be escaped from. So, consider whether paternal approval seeking is keeping you and your peers in unhealthy competition, if you are even changing some of your behaviors to get the approval of a male figure. So that's another thing that works against us in the workplace. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is the inner teenager, and it is powerful. We all have an inner teenager. It is that person who was around the dinner table in our own childhood and teen years, and we resisted authority, especially of a female, if we had one in the home, in very specific ways. In some cases, you may have played sick. You didn't like what was going on, so you played sick. You were going to rebel by getting sick. Other ways, you may have just ignored the requests or the demands and then acted like you didn't hear it. They're all forms of resistance that come up. But the power of the inner teenager right there around a conference table is, once you see it, you cannot unsee it, because it's like the person changes. They regress right before your eyes. And an illogical response sort of comes up, and it's not like them. It's uncharacteristic of them. So it's worth considering, did I do something that just triggered this inner teenager of this other person? So these are the foundations of resistance to women in leadership. And I hope that just by briefly touching on these, there's a lot more to explore in this, and of course I talk about it in my book, but just by briefly talking about these, can you imagine times when there may have been maternal triangulation in play against you? Can you imagine paternal approval seeking that I talked about? Have you and your peers been vying for the attention, the approval of a male leadership figure in an unhealthy way? Everybody is trying to please the boss. I get it. But it's much more so when the boss is a male. And so the table gets turned on you, especially if it's your direct reports going around you to seek the approval of a male boss above you. That's a problem. And then the third dynamic that I talked about was the power of the inner teenager. So if you look around and you see people changing and almost giving you illogical resistance, consider whether that is the exact same way that they used to resist their mom at home. It could be. It could be. So again, what do we do with these things? We sort of take inventory as far as the ways that we are showing up as the maternal figure. And a lot of times, the more we're trying to build bridges with people, we're trying to do it in ways that are maternal. We try to schedule a team meeting. We'll make sure that we don't miss any birthdays. We'll do all of these things that just further entrench us in the maternal role in their eyes. And it backfires. It backfires every single time. So with these new concepts, if they are new to you, what do I want you to do with them? Well, take stock of what's going on, find ways to get out of that maternal role, and put yourself into the role truly of a coach and leader of these folks, because the more you can release control and go into coaching mode, the less they will see you as that nagging maternal figure. I hope this was helpful to you. And if you aren't experiencing this, still hold on to these lessons, because there are going to be women that you coach or mentor, and maybe even your daughters as they grow up. They're going to need to hear this. They're going to need to be familiar with these concepts and just be aware of them. There's nothing that we need to be upset or angry about. It's a natural outcome of our culture. Every culture has consequences, I say. So this is a consequence of our culture, and we just need to be aware of it, accept the fact that this is going on. This is kind of an undercurrent that's going on as we're leading. And instead of being upset about it or staying awake at night ruminating about it, we accept it, and then we strategize on how we can deal with it and how we can be seen differently by the people that we lead and the people who lead us. Until next time, I'm Dalisia. Thank you for tuning in, and thanks for being a frontline leader in your world. See you soon.